Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So, 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
So Jessica, let's start with a bit about your background. How did you first get interested in the work you're doing today?
Yeah, I am from Mobile, Alabama. Actually, I should be clear, I'm from Pritchard, Alabama. And that's one of those things where when you're from a small town, you always identify more with the larger next city. But I think it's really important for me to say and shout out Pritchard, Alabama, because my father was the mayor there. And so I grew up in a community of elected officials. My cousin was the mayor in the neighboring city of Mobile. He was the first African-American mayor there. And I kind of grew up in their shadows and with their compadres, if you will, and thinking about how amazing the city of Pritchard is. It's majority at this point African-American. It's about 30,000 people. And I always wondered why a place that I thought was so rich in talent and resource, and why we couldn't harness that ability more fully. I mean, it's economically depressed, and I don't think that that's using too much robust language there, but I think that would be fair to say that the economy, like a lot of communities, a lot of small towns, it grew very large around as a bedroom community to Mobile and to some of the industry that was in the area, paper companies and paper mills. And as those kinds of jobs shifted in the area, so did the population, so did the housing stock, and so did a lot of professional opportunities for people in a wide range of career opportunities started to change. And then what we have left, though, is a people who have been situated and tied to that land for generations and generations. And there's still so much wisdom and so much story and so much power that's there. I think I, like a lot of people from communities like the one I just described, probably think very much about what would it take in order to really lift that community up off the ground again, and in a way that is equitable, that builds wealth, that is sustainable, and that gives people an experience to sort of fully live into who they're meant to be in the world, that creates opportunities and pathways where that isn't stunted just because of all of the isms and the political systems and all the things that we can all imagine that stops that from happening.
And so is that, so that sort of like analysis awareness sort of led you to like, what can I do now with these skills I have and this awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being the daughter of an elected official, of a mayor, I always had this idea of to whom much is given, much is expected. And while I didn't have a lot of money growing up, I did have a different level of access to information. So I understood more about the intersectionality between issues and the way that race and gender and class and things like that played out in our community, and how it stopped the tax base from really growing, and how all these other things started, where environmental issues were really very high, why that happened to this community. I think I knew that growing up probably differently than a lot of other people, because my dad brought that home with him. And so it did set me out to think about what would it take to make a different kind of investment in the people and places where I come from. And I think that led me to think about Runway Project much more seriously. All of that kind of came together following Hurricane Katrina, because that also hit the Gulf of Mexico, and that kind of spanned from Mobile all the way to Louisiana, and to some of the areas that we know about New Orleans, some places that we don't think of Slidell, Louisiana, and Pass Christian, Mississippi, and so many places in between there, and Coden, Alabama. And I think when I got to that point where Hurricane Katrina hits the region, I had been working in politics for a long time. At that point, I've been working first as the executive director of the League of Pissed Off Voters, which is very funny to mention because the logo has the Statue of Liberty and a bat. And I was the first executive director. We were just this like wild crew. Adrienne Marie Brown, who you might know from Emergent Strategies, worked for me. Yeah. She was there. It's like a really incredible group of people, an incredible moment in our lives to be able to work together, and then to find ourselves at this age still being in community and working together was really pretty great. Malia Lazu, lots of names that that you might think of. We were all there as young people working and organizing in our 20s, and then I think I just got really burned out by the political process, came back to Mobile, and then right after that, Hurricane Katrina hits. And so that was really the first place in my life where I think I looked at everything and realized that all the systems around me were failing. Because even political system is an idea worth you think about investing in, like it's going to hold, it's going to work. And I pretty much thought, I mean, I was still in my 20s. I worked with I saw my dad manage a city at a very local level, but I still thought nationally, internationally that, systems around housing, around transportation, access to food, how we support our small businesses, things, I thought those things would hold. And inside of that disaster and watching communities that I grew up visiting and having cousins and play friends and everybody connected to see that it failed so many people. And again, those communities reminded me of growing up in Pritchard, Alabama, and thinking about what would it take for us to get it to a different place. And somewhere inside of all of that, Ryan, I think I noticed something that I had missed in all of the schooling, all of the conversations, but it reminded me of home. It reminded me of Alabama and Pritchard and places that I grew up in. Selma, Alabama. There's a whole nother chapter of my life that crosses with Tarana Burke and me too, and Selma and Latasha Brown, and all of us grew up together there as well. But I think at that point in my life, I think I just started to really realize that community was more critical to the answer and to this equation than I think I understood. People who were able to recover had networks, they had friends, they had family, they had folks where if they were displaced, they could maybe go to their home, or they had somebody who could send some money to them to help them get out of that situation. And the people who didn't have that, well, they didn't have it because their friends were the people who lived next door to them and the people who they went to school with. And those same people were in some of the same financial situations. And so I started to understand that linking us together differently in an idea of what it meant to be community, to be friends, to be family to one another, that became like a real driving force, because I saw that we were only going to survive. That was the only way to survive it all. When the hardest things hit, when I think the realities of climate change hit so many of these communities that I care about, and this was definitely a man-made and natural disaster merging together. but I see our communities more and more. And I think about how will you recover? What does resiliency look like in the face of that kind of disaster? And how do we prepare for those things? And all of that gave rise to the Runway Project, those two sort of distinct periods of time. As a young person watching my dad in politics in that community, and then being an older person or, new in my career, and stumbling and walking into the realities of following Hurricane Katrina. Yeah, it changed me quite a bit.
It's interesting. My mom's side is from New Orleans, and I used to have an uncle in Slidell, actually, and they left after Katrina because everything,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But definitely different. Obviously, showing that like if white folks have money, they can like go, like I'm gonna go move here for a few years and like chill until things are better. And so I think I was actually working in the Senate for John Kerry, like answering the phones. I was an intern when Katrina happened, and it was just like lit, like all the lines were lit up. Like 24 hours, people being like, what are you going to do to like help? And I was like, this is, because I think sometimes you're like, if you're not from the area, you just sort of are like, is this how bad is it really? And this was like traumatic. And so
it completely reshaped the tenor and fabric of New Orleans and the region when that happened. I mean, I think that anybody along the coast, we all kind of tell time now related to Katrina. We're all like, what happened pre-Katrina, post-Katrina? Like it's a constant marker in our minds about when something really, really huge changed for all of us. And while I love the city and I think about New Orleans, but I also think about the areas closer to here, Coden and other communities. And I applaud everybody who kind of like dug in and kept the work going and rebuilding way after all of the fanfare and people left and everything else. They're the people who I really look up to, and I take my guidance from around what it is and what we need to be creating. And I look at all of their work and I just think, it's just really the beginning, because more and more coastland is eroding away with every moment that we're, living and behaving and thinking with the way that we move our economy. It's crippling people's abilities to make a living who make it back through shrimping and oysters and other kind of seafood. It's changing the dynamics of those communities in ways that I don't think we fully even wrapped our arms all the way around just yet. And that part, I think, is the part that gets untold in all of that. Is like, this was something, it changed all of us. But I think there is so much wisdom if we were smart to really learn more about what it was inside of that we could then get on the front end in communities and start laying down. I think if you sort of think of this sort of imaginary, the sandbags, laying our own sandbags around us and thinking about what it takes to make these communities much more resilient, so that they can face the inevitability of all of the changes that are facing all of us right now.
It's a great lead in to Runway Project. So maybe you should tell folks about that one.
Yeah. So inside of all of this is that this thread around friends and family and what it means to be in community started to emerge. And I had been thinking about the Runway Project for a few years. I ended up winning a fellowship with the Nathan Cummings Foundation for Economic Disruption. And what I talked about was what would be really disruptive is if we actually practice being friends and family and an economy, like if we really dug in. And I talked about it from the place of that first kind of capital that a business gets when they get going. And it was more of an analogy, but it became sort of a symbol of what we meant inside of this. And I talked about like when you get going with your business and people tell you, you should borrow money from your friends and your family. It's such a great idea. And if you're me and millions of others like me, you look around and you're like, what friends, what family, has that kind of money? And that's because wealth really does fall along racial lines in this country. And when we look at what the average wealth is for a Black family, which at the time when I started Runway, it was about 11,000, but it's since decreased there. Compared to the average wealth for white families, which was around 142,000. And we knew at that point with data coming out that Black wealth was expected to hit $0 in about 30 years. I often thought about like the vulnerability of those communities when a hurricane comes and you have no money, you have zero wealth, no money in the account to be able to actually make decisions of if you can leave or not. You've got to just sort of like many of my family members do, you have to quote unquote ride it out. And I think about what it means to have zero wealth when you are facing down the police and they take you to jail, and how will you get bailed out? Because you only have $0, but your friends and your family members, they don't have that kind of money to support you. They don't have that wealth in their homes and all of those different things to do that. And so how much more vulnerable does it make a community when that happens? One thing we did know, though, was that African Americans, and in general, most people, you have more wealth when you're an entrepreneur. You have the wealth that comes from the actual asset of the business. You have a wealth of networks. You have not just the people around you, but you also have opportunities to meet so many different people in relation to your business. And all of those things, I think, are so critically important to make a community more resilient. And so we started thinking about Runway and this friends and family point, and I thought it would be really great to think of how we practice being friends and family. And so we thought about a loan product, which typically, you know, if you've heard the term friends and family, it usually is in the form of like some sort of equity kind of structure for financing for a business. But what we wanted to do was to think about what their conditions needed to be for all of us to practice friends and family. And the folks who are able to make those equity kinds of arrangements, well, they usually have wealth already. You know, they've got, you know, from an institution or independently wealthy, and it didn't give us a chance to really give us all the identity of being an investor. And that was really important to me because I wanted all of us to be able to practice what it meant to be friends and family. And so the Runway Project makes loans to African-American, primarily entrepreneurs, and at the earlier stages of their business. And we give out what we kind of consider more patient kinds of loans, but really it's a 5-year loan product where the first 2 years are interest-only payments. And so we really want the person to get to principal and be able to like work with the money. And hopefully by year 3, we see the growth in their business where they're able to then kind of start tacking on and making the interest and principal payments. We piloted that project in Oakland with Self-Help Federal Credit Union. And, you know, and we also, alongside of that, opened up CDs. And so the idea was that if you wanted to support these kind of businesses, buy a CD at the credit union because they're making this capital available for us to do this. And we wanted to make sure that the credit union took us seriously. So we said for every dollar that we want to lend out, we'll raise the CD money to come in. I know you don't need it that way, but we really want you to know that we're serious about this community. And so we've been working with our banking and credit union partners to raise capital for deposits, because I want them to know there is reward in doing the right thing and fixing and doing the repair work for the system. I want investors who have been still very sort of caught up inside of where risk is and the linkages between how we think about where risk might be in an investment and how we think about the biases around race inside of that. And I wanted them to have an opportunity to make an investment and learn and test in a secured instrument. And I wanted that opportunity to be not only for those big investors, but also for people like my father or myself who don't have a lot of money, but really want to see our communities come back. And we want to put our money where our mouth is, but we can't necessarily afford to lose more. So maybe this is a part of our saving strategy. inside of this as well. And for those entrepreneurs, we wanted them to know that there was a network of people who looked like them, who believed in them. And that was the most important thing. I wanted them to know that they were believed in, because you spend all of your life where nobody ever gives you a shot, nobody ever takes a chance on you or affirms your brilliance or your contributions. You start to believe that. You start to believe that you don't have anything to work with. And I think that that probably is the most tragic thing inside of the economy, is how we pass over and look past so many talented people when we shouldn't do it.
Absolutely. One thing some listeners may be interested in is, how could are you still taking investments for those CDs? And if so, like, where can they, where can folks go to learn more about this?
They didn't see me perk up when you said that. So yes, absolutely. 100%. So right now we have a fantastic partnership with Berkshire Bank, which is a Massachusetts bank. And that partnership has given Runway the opportunity to support entrepreneurs of color in Massachusetts, New York, and inside of their entire footprint, Pennsylvania. And so right now you can contact Berkshire Bank or contact me directly, and I'll put you in contact with the team over there to open up that CD. That opportunity is open and available. And we're kind of quiet about it. We don't put it out all the time. Because quite honestly, it's really one of those things that if this is something you're committed to, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's like, of course, this is what you do. So we're lucky to have people who agree with us on that and support us, and we don't have to work as rigorously at that part of things. And that means that we get to spend more time with the entrepreneurs, because inside of that piece of it, there's so much work. For the life of the loans that we give technical support through our partnership with Optima Bootcamp. And we're able to think about the community that goes around friends and family money, because it's not just the money. It's also, that rich auntie or uncle that we imagine or we would love to all have. It's really thinking about what that person also brings to the table, which is the wisdom or a network, or to be able to say, hey, you need this board member, or you need me to make a call to the city to get, to help you with your permit on whatever, those kind of things are really important. And so we get to spend more time focusing on that part, which is really great. And so we've been lucky to have, through self-help, Annie McShire, who left self-help, and then she's now over at RSF, social finance, but she was one of the folks, in investor relations over at Self-Help at the time, who was really incredible about helping us to make sure we stayed in contact and communication with our investment community. So yes, that was the long answer, Ryan. Yes is the short answer. It is still open, it's still available, and all you have to do is just email me, and I can put you in contact with the folks that do that.
Okay. Why don't you drop your email, and then we'll do it again at the end, just in case.
Okay. Yeah, it's Jessica at therunwayproject.org. Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll do that one more time so folks have it in case they want to reach out. So Jessica, what are you most excited about right now?
You know what? I didn't know this was going to happen. All right. So this is one of those exclusives here on the podcast. Something I didn't know that was going to happen was that as we expand Runway into different markets, those entrepreneurs want to be connected to each other. We have an underwriting process where we build local loan committees in each area. So the underwriting doesn't come to Runway, but it's still vested in community. And as those people as the people on each loan committee, they're learning like what it means. We do a class called Decolonizing Your Due Diligence Process. And everybody is just sort of at this moment, just kind of waking up and realizing like, this is my jam. This is what I want to do. But they want to be connected to one another. I think it means it's about reinforcing the community and the culture that we're creating together. I didn't expect that to happen. I actually thought, I knew I was saying practice friends and family, but I didn't realize like, oh, you really want to like be together. And so that part is really exciting to me because to think about how we care for each other and reinforce these sort of set of values that we're living into that brought us all into Runway, I feel is really, really exciting for me. So that's it. Yeah, I love the community.
And is that a virtual space where they're in community, or how does it work if they're spread out?
We're figuring that out. That's what's new about it. We're figuring it out. Right now, each local area has its own tenor and vibe. Boston operates differently than Oakland a little bit, but my Oakland entrepreneurs are like, what I didn't think about was they see Runway as a potential partner to help them extend and open up new markets. I wasn't even thinking that. So I have some entrepreneurs in Oakland saying, hey, do they need my services in Boston? And the Boston are like, do they want me to come to Oakland? Let's hang out and let's do some stuff together. So just thinking about how we facilitate that in person is part of what's up. I don't know if that'll be virtual or if that'll be something that we physically do together. It could look like fellowships. It could look like, a retreat or something. And then I think, it may look like a conference. I mean, we're rapidly growing with lots of people inside of that universe of folks that it might look like that. I think there's some continuing education kind of pieces that our bank partners and business support partners, like people in that ecosystem, want to learn how and what we're thinking about, how we think about it. So we're still investigating it all, but I think that's what makes it so exciting for me, Ryan, is that it was something that I just did not quite see coming. But then when it arrived, I thought, how awesome.
It's similar to, we have a fund as well, the Force for Good Fund, and 13 investees, and they like, collaborating and talking. And then also we're doing this online MBA course, the Next Economy MBA, and there's like 40 students per cohort, and they all want to be connected. So there's something like, I think maybe that's the next stage of this like new economy is like, how do you really connect these people who are all thinking about this?
I think so. I think we're out here like churning up the goodness over here and having a lot of fun, and people want to, stay in, and which is like, hey, I think that makes our work a lot easier when we have more people who are bought in and get it and are moving with it, because I think it takes it from this thing where we're having to talk about what it is to actually living in it and being in the thing, which is the ultimate goal for us, right? Yeah.
So I heard a talk you gave, and you talked about your Buddhist practice. Can you talk about how did you come into contact with Buddhism, and like what's your sort of practice like? And
yeah, I was in my 20s. I'm still a part of this really great community. Yes, where there are a lot of people in the Bay Area connected to the jams and that sort of body of work. Shout out to everybody who's been to a jam. But I ended up having this fantastic roommate in Raleigh. And we were supposed to be going to sleep at night, but every night I would like bend her ear on philosophical life questions, like, what about this and what about that? And she talked to me a lot about her own practice and how she answered some of those questions. And it was in my 20s. And I think it was one of those retreats, like I came out to California, I'm from the South, and everything was vegan. And we were talking about our emotions. And I was like, what is going on here? What are we doing? I was so undone. And the Raleigh was incredibly generous and sweet. And we talked every night for a week. And then after that, it was conversations with her and books. And then interestingly, I just sort of started to like kind of move in community with people who also had their own kinds of practices. It wasn't something that I was actually seeking out, but then over a period of time, it just started to happen that the people that I wanted to work with also sort of had their own, practices inside of this. And I realized that there was this thread that was being woven between all of us. And I think it really was around, for me, what I learned about what it means to be in right relationship to the planet, to the people, to what it means to take your life and to put it into service and to find the really beautiful sort of joyful things about that, to be used properly. And I think it sort of held me in a way where I think all of the work that I've been doing and the things that feel right to me, I always find in my meditations and in my readings and sitting and listening to other teachers. I mean, I've got really an incredible teacher on our team with Conda Mason. But to be able to integrate that in every move that we're making, that isn't something it doesn't mean that that's a thing that's happened separate from what I'm doing. It actually is baked into that. And I don't often get a chance to talk about how influential those early moments and conversations, and still even, talking to my teachers and being in community really is. But it gives me a grounding and it gives me a touch point to go back to say, okay, this is why, this is how. And then the spirit sort of guides me on this is when. And that's a different conversation. I think that's a lot of my African roots and heritage that tells me some of those things too. But I'm grateful to have it all.
Sounds like a lot of great tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been an incredible journey. It's been an incredible journey with beautiful people who have poured so generously into me. And I think about all of those lessons and from Selma and my young years and going to camp there, and to being on the board and studying at Highlander in Tennessee, and just all the beautiful people along the way inside of that. Each lesson, each master teacher has been a thought partner in Runway for me.
Now, since you have a politics background, do a quick sidestep to this. How are you feeling these days about this Democratic primary? Are you like sort of not really inspired by anyone, or how are you feeling good about it?
I'm inspired, but maybe differently, not necessarily about the candidates per se. I think we'll emerge with the right candidate when we get to that point. But what I am really encouraged by is the diversity of people, of candidates like that. This level of diversity would not have been possible when I first started my sojourn into politics. So that even is incredibly amazing to see women and women of color, and to see the kinds of stuff that people are talking about. I mean, to talk about reparations in a political debate is like mind blowing, and to talk about the prison industrial complex with real rigor. And I'm excited about that the baseline is being moved in a way that it needed to have been moved. And I think that is a huge success. And I love also, aside from that, all of the organizing that is going on out around these elections. I, of course, love Black Voters Matters and the work of LaTosha Brown and Cliff Albright and the entire team around that, because they really champion those little victories. And let me just say, when you've been in the South, voting is still way more difficult than people fully imagine. You could vote for a candidate, and because those elected officials run pretty much the entire economy of that county or that town, they can call you and say, well, we're going to call your loans that you have with our furniture store. And your whole life is now, we're going to do this, and they can really mess with you in ways that we just don't even talk about. And so when they're able to push back, when they're able to take over, local city councils and all these things that feel like they're way off over here. I'm a person who's always loved down ballot races, because I know that is where politics and where the rubber meets the road. Any presidential candidate who says they want to turn out this and that, whatever vote, eventually they're going to end up calling one of these women that I know who gets out there and they turn out those votes in those local communities. So I love the work that's happening down ballot, and I'm excited about that kind of thing. And I think what's larger at stake in this election really is about who this country intends to really be. And it's a much more philosophical, emotional, it's less political, if you will, but it is really around, we espouse a certain set of values in the world that we say we care about. And then on the same side, we're espousing a set of values that we say we deplore, but we're moving those agendas across the globe. And I think it's time for every voter to get very precise, to get very clear about how we want to move for each other and for the planet, and to make no exceptions about that, to be very, very honest about what that is. And I think we are, as a country, what is our superpower is our diversity. And I think that when we get to really like tap into it and harness it, and there is a beautiful sort of thing that we can create in the world that I think is an important puzzle piece to every community out there. But we've got to be willing to have the courage to sit down and to do the work that we failed to do so many different times, to talk about what the cost has been around an exploitative economy that has prioritized the disposability of Black and brown bodies over and over and over again. And if we don't say that to one another, what good is the election? What good is whatever candidate? That's where we are at this moment in time.
I 100% agree that the dialogue has been pretty astounding. Like talking about white supremacy, like, and not just like Nazis or KKK, but like white supremacy as a system and an institution in the U.S. And yeah, so
yeah,
I think there's
Yeah, it's been important. It's been important, long overdue, and it's important. And so I'm grateful for every candidate who showed up for those conversations. I think it's the right thing to do.
What are the top 2 to 3 things that keep you up at night?
The intersectionality between climate and wealth, and particularly as it relates to communities of color, Black communities who will be inevitably differently displaced. That freaks me all the way out. Like I can't even imagine and focus and think. It's one thing to think about how we close the wealth gap, but it's quite another thing to think about that timeline running alongside of how we prevent the climate change. Like it's just, and quite honestly, it leads me to a conversation with myself about imagining what happens next. If all the things that we're saying we must do don't get done, what happens after that? And that keeps me, I think those 2 points of it keep me up all the time.
Yes. And maybe that community, that fabric that you're weaving, that many of us are trying to weave, it is like sort of that critical, the critical resilience. Because definitely the climate is going to change. And it's just like it's almost like what happens when it does.
Yeah. What happens when it does. And my prayer is that the groundwork that we're laying can help us navigate some of those things, that it can bring that fabric together, that it can give us different sets of relationships and tools to work on, to use, to navigate all of that. But yeah, I think that's one of those things where I really just sort of like lean more into the spirituality of it, because I can't know all the things, but what I do know right now is that we are better when we're together. And we have not always honored what that meant, what courage that's taken to fight for being together. But I say now is the time to double down on it and to believe in it more than you believe in anything else, because I do believe it is a thing that's going to give us the ability to stay afloat, if you will, the buoyancy to stay afloat.
And given the sort of inevitability of a lot of these challenges, where do you see Runway Project and your work going over the next like 10, 20, 30 years? Is it to to open in more cities, or is it like do the work stronger in the existing areas?
Well, our current goal, our team, they're going to kill me that I repeated this, but I just laugh every time we say it. Our strategic mission is to do what we say we're going to do and do it good. Not do it well, but we're going to do it good. So I think we want to rest assured that our current strategy is to do the things we've committed to and to really do it good, to do it well. But Runway is really needed in every community. There is not an exception to this. we failed to offer the kinds of capital and support communities of color and their ventures for, since Black people have been in this country. And so so I think that we're going to end up. Our goal is to be in every community in the long haul. I think for that means that we don't want to compromise the idea of being friends and family and building making sure that we build local community around a loan fund, to make sure that we work with partnering organizations on the ground that are doing business support programs, that we really are something that can charge or add something into the ecosystem that's there. And where places where the ecosystem isn't as strong and isn't as robust as it needs to be, that we come in, we bring critical capacities to that through our partnerships that we have. So I'd like for all of us, I think at the end of the day, to at the first blush, to be buying CDs and to think about how we make deeper investments in those entrepreneurs. I think the second part of that for us is growing more of the kinds of capital needs that those entrepreneurs have. I mean, we have a microloan sort of product to start with, but the follow-on capital for those entrepreneurs and growth capital and all those things, real estate capital, so that we can actually make sure they get into the marketplace and we're holding those communities. All of those things I think are important to the vision of what we have around supporting entrepreneurs. But right now, we really want to just be fantastic at providing that early money and getting people in the door and building relationship with them and letting them know we are there for the long haul. If we can do that and do it good, we will have been successful. So that is the mission. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in particular you're looking to for inspiration, or who are you watching now that's sort of leading this sort of like next economy chart?
We talked about this before the call started, but I'm really very lucky to be in community with so many brilliant people. I love the work that Namaka is doing right now. She's just, if you get a chance to hear her speak or she's just brilliant at a different level. And so I'm grateful to be in community with her and Aaron, Tanaka, and everybody who is a part of that community. I think all three of us, Kali and a couple other folks, we're all a part of the CED Fellowship. And so we get to Community for Economic Democracy Fellowship. And so we get to jam and do thought leadership work with each other. I love a lot of the work that I'm really inspired by other movements too, and the ways that other people are holding these very big and complex conversations. And so I really am inspired by the work that's happening politically, the work that's happening with that Tarana has been leading around Me Too, and thinking about women in particular. That is like the thing that is like my songbird heart right now, is focusing a lot more on the intersectionality between the patriarchy, racism, and our financial economic system, and what happens to Black women. Inside of that is a differently nuanced piece that over and over again keeps coming up. And I'm excited to see the ways that women are showing up and leading. And I'm learning over and over and over again, because there's so much stuff that we all have to get this right, to get this new economy right. We've got to unlearn so much stuff inside of this. And that is how we think about our women, what their contribution is, and how we give them the space to really thrive, is something that we just so rarely talk about and move. I mean, we talk about it from a place of getting more board members, or talk about it from, investment capital for women. But I think that there's so much more that we're just starting to scratch the surface. And so all of the people who are doing gender lens investment, I learn from them. I'm learning from just way too many folks to even name. And I think this is one of those moments in time where just some of the coolest stuff is starting to pop up and come forward. And I'm happy to just sort of be one of many in that group of people, because every time we get a panel discussion or a podcast or whatever, I'm like, oh, that's what you're doing. Oh, you're going to put your money and situate it like this and do that. I could do, so we're taking each other's models and changing different things around and adapting, and all of that's so much fun to do. Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm reading Brittany Cooper's Eloquent Rage book.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Everybody who's listening, get Brittany Cooper's book, Eloquent Rage. She's just a brilliant writer, and that's the kind of stuff that we need to be peppering into what we're doing right now. You're right on. Love it, Ryan.
And so what do you need right now? We talked about it a little bit about the CDs, but is there, maybe reiterating that piece, or also how else can people help you grow this next economy?
Yeah, I think the thing about Runway Project is that we right now operate with a portion. We're 3 years old, so we still operate with a portion of grant dollars. So those contributions help a lot. There's not a lot of spread. We do 4% loans, so we don't make money on those loans, and we don't want to. We really think that there is other opportunities for us to grow other business products that can solve that. But in the meantime, grants really are fantastic. I love opportunities to get a chance to do our training. So if people want to talk about that training, the decolonizing your due diligence process, or really how we think about things, that is also super available for us to come and do in community. And or if you're a CDFI or a lender and want to think about other ways to unpack some of the processes that you're using, our team is available to do that kind of stuff. And then more opportunities to speak. I mean, I have a microphone, we got a microphone, we'll show up, we'll be there. But more chances to talk to folks. Particularly, I love to talk to young people at this point, and I love to talk to women because those are my sweet spots. But really, anybody who is definitely thinking about the intersection between wealth and race, and thinking about entrepreneurship as a vehicle of maybe changing some of those things, I'd love to be invited to talk about it.
And have you ever thought about starting a podcast yourself?
I've started like 2 or 3 times, failed miserably, but I don't have the sweet microphone that you have.
Yeah.
That's part. Yeah, and no discipline. It takes, hats off to you. It takes a great deal of discipline, and this is so needed. And I love this platform. I wanted to do something cool. I'm not as cool as everybody at Lift Economy. So I mean, what can I say?
The key is you got to get somebody else to do the editing. It's like, I can record it.
Right.
Then we'll pay somebody.
That's where I went wrong.
Yeah.
That's where I was going wrong. I was going wrong there. And, but never say never. I don't think so, though. I mean, we're I'm mostly interested in really hearing more about the startup experiences of our businesses. And I just think that they're just like, every time I get a chance to hear when we're in loan committee meetings and they come in and they talk about their business and their why and what happened, I'm just like floored that we're still standing in a lot of ways. Yeah. And I think there's just so much that we don't even know about the life of the entrepreneur and getting to the first tranches of money that we could hear more about. And they always have really great questions to one another. So I just sort of imagine that if we ever did anything, it would be more about focusing on them talking to each other or something like that. Me, I don't have anything interesting else to say. This is it. Yeah.
In terms of folks following up, maybe could you list the website where folks can learn more, and then maybe email or any social media that you use or want to put out? Yeah.
Oh, first things first, let me just give a shout out to our incredible communications director, Jamika. You got to check her out, her work on social media right now on Instagram. So follow us on Instagram. It's the Runway Project. I think it's like the Runway Project. I don't know how we came up with that, but whatever. Follow that. And she's making like these incredible collages with all of our business owners. And it's just graphically so sharp and stunning. Like, I can't even deal with how fortunate we are to have this level of artistry. So check us out on Instagram, on social media there. And she's constantly posting great stuff about the entrepreneurs. You can obviously go to our website, which is therunwayproject.org. And you can also see our entrepreneurs. You can figure out, get a portal or a way to make a donation to Runway. And if you're interested in purchasing a certificate of deposit, there's information on the website there. And you can always just email me too, which is jessica@therunwayproject.org. It's super simple. Just say the Runway Project over and over and over again. The funny thing is, and I want to say this now, I'm probably going to confuse everybody when I say this, but I just feel like it's worth saying, which is I had someone ask me, the story that they made up was that I was a model. I was like, thank you. I was a model and I won Project Runway, the design show.
Right.
And I used my winnings to then invest in entrepreneurs. Okay. And it was a really, really fantastic story. That did not happen. When we talk about the Runway Project, we're talking about the fact that all of us have gotten a little runway room to take off, and what it means to give people the space. And to say that, I think early on we talked about that this wasn't about not having the right pilot or the right plane, but that the infrastructure is not properly designed and in full, then nobody can take off. And so that what we're really doing is really talking about investment and dealing with the infrastructure for those entrepreneurs and not putting the onus of solving everything on the actual entrepreneur. So that's what we mean when we say runway. Not that I was a supermodel and gave all my winnings to support entrepreneurs, although I do appreciate that you think I'm so cute. Thank you.
That's a great story to be told too. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Jessica. Well, thanks so much for joining. And I really admire your work and I really appreciate you for being on the show.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.